to the Next Wave Network Alliance meeting. And today we're going to talk about adding immersive experiences to your curriculum. And most specifically, we're going to introduce you to a couple of our organizations here in the Alliance that are doing some really exciting stuff. And so we built Dr. Obeid and I built a taxonomy for immersive experience design. And that taxonomy has been in development with the Air Force over the last 6 years. And the University of Central Florida has built it into an artificial intelligence tool to help professors figure out where they might insert immersive experiences into their syllabi, what they might add, and then how to build it. And so it's really very, very impressive. And so I actually like to move us forward and introduce Wendy Howard, Dr. Howard, from the University of Central Florida, and ask her to introduce the idea of what they've been working on. And then after that, we'll have Kevin Corcoran will come in, who's built it, and share us a little of his process, purpose. And then afterwards, Dr. Clayton from the Air Force, who shared it with their leadership a couple of weeks ago, will share the feedback that we've gotten from that. So, and then afterwards, we'll take you a little bit into our discoveries, and we'll share with you where we're going for next month. So that's sort of the agenda. So Wendy, welcome to the Alliance meeting, and for playing. I'm excited to hear your thoughts and what you've been working on.
Well, thank you, but this is going to be a quick introduction because although I've been sitting in this Alliance meeting to represent UCF, really all of this work has been done by Kevin. So in our earlier conversations with you, JJ, we learned about, and with Caius, we learned about your taxonomy. Kevin really embraced it and started to build out a tool that can help us. A lot of what we do in our unit is supporting faculty in developing online courses and content for their online courses. So really, he started developing this with that consultative relationship in mind, to allow our instructional designers to help, and also my team to help us work through that conversation with a faculty member who knows they want to do something, but they don't know where to start. So with that, I'm just going to quickly turn it over to my boss, the Assistant Vice Provost of the Center for Distributed Learning, Kevin Corcoran.
Thank you, Wendy. Thank you, JJ. Hopefully you can see my screen being shared.
Yes, we can.
Awesome. And I also want to make reference to Rebecca McNulty, who's on here, who was also a key part to this development for this tool. And again, really, JJ's work with the taxonomy was really the engine for this. The AI overlay just makes it hopefully a little bit more simpler to engage with a faculty member. But the intent really is to start from a point of time where our instructional designers may be engaging with their faculty and either looking for opportunities to introduce immersive, and where they could upload a syllabus and it could scan through that structure and say, here are opportunities that we have identified within your course structure where there may be an opportunity. Or if the faculty member is coming with, I have this clear vision of what I want to do, I just can't put it into tech terms, but I want to just brain dump. So there's two starting points of one is a brain dump and one is just an upload of a syllabus. Just for the purposes of this demonstration, I'm going to actually just upload a file here. One moment. So this is a media literacy course that I've taught in the past. So it's going to just pull in, and then it's going to scan through my structure and look at all the different assessments and activities that I have laid out into my course and look for opportunities where an immersive activity could replace an existing written or oral or what have you. So it's just going to take a moment as it goes through. Rebecca, as this is analyzing, is there anything for context that we should be adding?
Just more of people don't know what they don't know. So this is the kind of thing where if you're sitting in my seat from instructional design, faculty comes to you with a potential problem. They don't necessarily have the vocabulary to share what kind of solutions could solve that problem. So we're just looking for ways of giving them that shared vocabulary and making things a little bit faster. But I see you have finished loading.
Yeah, so based on the different modules, and you can see that in Module 3, we cover misinformation and disinformation. It's a suggested experience is a virtual reality misinformation spreader simulator. If I wanted to look at Module 4 around deepfakes and ethical use of AI, there could be a deepfake detective assignment. If I look at methods of persuasion and cognitive biases, there could be some type of escape room, or if I look at course media production assignment, which is sort of a capstone piece, maybe there's an immersive broadcasting studio, or if I don't like any of these, but it's sparked an idea, I can still add one in there. So for the sake of argument, I'm going to go to a deepfake detective piece, and I'm going to move forward to JJ's brain here for this. So with these sliders, we have the ability to sort of set the parameters that will come out in a final report, and there'll be a faculty implementation and a technology stack part to this. But if I want to make sure that I'm adjusting this for the right technology, the right audience, I can say, look, I want to make this as available to as many people. So I really want this to be mobile screen ready versus full headgear haptic. And as I go through this decision tree, sort of fine tune this, do I want the learner to just be engaged via watching, or I want them to have a sort of choosing piece? So I certainly want this to be in an interactive display. Do I want this to be stylized, like in an anime fashion or what have you, or do I want it to be this photorealistic? Well, considering I'm talking about deepfakes, I want photorealistic. Do I want this to be a multiplayer game or a solo one? Well, for this piece, I want this to be a single player game just so they can look at a deep fake. And then do I want this to be guided, or I want them to really be immersed in the narrative piece? So I want this to be engaging as possible. And then based on some other feedback, we have a slider scale around what kind of audience. So if we are working with various folks that we want to go through elementary all the way up to college level or professional, we have the ability to do that as well. So based once I've done these fine tunings, we're going to make sure that the activity is rooted in Bloom's taxonomy. So when we're looking at here for what are the defined outcomes, we want them to analyze videos for, I'm just going to put something that's not a well-organized for deepfakes. And then what it's going to do is once I've gone through and added whatever my learning outcomes are going to be, it's going to say, okay, twofold. How are we going to actually assess within this immersive experience? Now, it's generating some ideas for us if we don't really know how we're going to do that, but there's also always the ability to sort of add your own right here on the bottom. But looking at some of the ones that AI has recommended here, we can calculate the percentage of gaze during the focused. We could do track accuracy for timestamp and precision, measure the number of correctly categorized articles. I think for the sake of argument, we're just going to go with the number of correctly categorized items here. And so that is going to be the catalyst for generating this next report, but we're going to do some tech stack elements here. We're going to have a due date, or have an optional due date here. And I just got to move my screen so I can get here. So if we're looking at this for UCF context, we want to make sure that this is available for August 3rd, right before the start of the semester, so that there can be some advanced testing here. And then, are we looking at a quick prototype? Is this going to be a pilot for the fall semester? Is this going to be a full-blown production? And this is a guesstimate, but this is a slider that basically will show you potential number of hours invested in here. The real piece, and Andrew gets the credit for this one, is this one about constraints. So knowing that not everybody has coders on staff, not everybody has Unity, Unreal systems, not everybody has certain technologies, you can say, I only have 3D Vista and ThingLink available, no coders. And what it'll do is when it goes and generates this final report, it should take into account when we're looking at what the tech stack is, it should not be producing any recommendations that require Unity, Unreal, headsets, haptics. It should be a lower tech investment here. Rebecca, what am I missing as we spin?
Very little. Again, from my seat, what's been helpful about something like this is faculty have the ideas for what they want students to experience, but they don't necessarily think through how they're going to evaluate that experience. Like, what are they going to measure? And this is going to give us some practical ways to bridge that conversation.
So I want to mention right up on the top is there's a regenerate. So if you don't like what AI is produced based on your parameters, you can go through and tweak. Or if you do, you can output this as a PDF right here. But it should walk through here and give us a summary of what we talked about, utilizing only 3D Vista or ThingLink. So we're looking at a forensic web lab space. So it's summarizing what it is presenting as a final proposal here. And then on the right-hand side, it's talking about how we're actually going to do the assessment based on the parameters we set in. And as we scroll down, we get to how is this going to be implemented from the faculty standpoint? So how, are there any preparation steps that they need to do in setting the stage within their course environment, within the LMS piece? Is there anything that they need to do during the facilitation part to enhance this? And is there anything that they have to do as a debrief once the activity is over? So there should be some guidelines here on what are the pedagogical tasks that need to be accomplished. But for argument's sake, on the bottom here, we get to a feasibility analysis, and based on the 100 hours that was on that sliding scale, again, this is something that can be tweaked. But more importantly, I think, is that we have what the required tech stack is on the right-hand side. And so we're looking at, this is just a browser, Chrome, Safari, or Edge for students. We're looking at 3D Vista. We're looking at potentially a SCORM package or something contained within the LMS. We're looking at some video editing software and rendering some 360 panoramic images. Then from a developer standpoint, there is a little bit more detail on what AI is presenting as what the next steps are. So phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 deployment piece. So obviously, at any point in time, you could scrap this, regenerate it, have it produce something different. You can take this as an outline and say, okay, I agree with 90% of this. This is a good outline to work from, but I'm going to tweak some things. This isn't meant to be a set in stone path forward, but it does help, as Rebecca said, go from an abstract vision or no vision whatsoever to some suggested pathways to create a more emerging and immersive learning experience. So I'll stop there for questions.
Aaron?
So, oh, shoot, hit the wrong button. So forgive me, I was a few minutes late. I caught the slider part of the demo, and then of course this last part leading up to the developer roadmap. So just a quick reminder about who I am. I'm the CTO at Orchestrate XR. So I'm actually a software engineer. I spend most of my day doing this. And I'm just, can you put a little bit more color behind this particular section, the developer roadmap section, and what the reasoning is behind including that in this report for the benefit of the person who's using it?
Sure. Within a UCF context, we generally have, this wouldn't be a faculty-facing or an end-user-facing tool. This would be used in consultation. And our instructional designers are, gatekeepers.
We have a range of technical skills as part of that gatekeeping.
Right. So we do have folks that are video producers, developers, what have you. But the instructors can't get to those folks without going through instructional design first. So we want to make sure that there's a sound educational purpose and assessment model before we get to the developers. So this is something where the IDE can work offline with the development team or the development stack and say, this is kind of the vision.
Yeah.
And so that it accelerates the conversation to whatever the production is, but doesn't necessarily bind the developers to this roadmap.
Yeah. And that's that's exactly where I was going with it. And this is just two observations very briefly. One, as an engineering lead working with other engineers, there's a lot of friction that usually comes of going it with a timeline in hand, right? Timelines and especially phases are something that should really be developed in consultation. So coming into that conversation with this pre-framing of first we're going to do this and then we're going to do that, only invites, confrontation. Well, we could do this first, or we could do this faster, or whatever it is. So there's that preconceived, notion about it. And the other aspect of this, which is kind of eerie in my own work with AI as a coding assistant, it's interesting to have that same emotional response when the AI does this stuff too, because the AI will go, well, phase 1 should be this, and it'll take 2 weeks, and phase 2 will be this, and it'll take 20 minutes. And I'm like, first of all, you're gonna do all of this all at once. What do you, don't waste my intellectual time with all of this breakdown. So this is just for what it's worth. I think that, I thought I understood what the goal was by having that there, and you confirmed that for me. So I guess the rest of it is just sort of a cautionary tale, because if you set those preconceived expectations, you're likely to get confrontation with those people.
Absolutely. And if I could just jump in quickly, just from the faculty consultation seat, I would say that this roadmap, it's called the developer roadmap, but it's closer to giving someone in my seat a way to manage expectations with faculty. Part of the constraints that we built into this demo scenario is that UCF has access to these two tools right now. So if someone comes to me with this potential scenario, with this syllabus, I can say, great, let's have an initial conversation. You might come back to me, and faculty don't necessarily have the background to understand what kind of timeline and work intensity this kind of project could take. Yep. So you can give them a big picture, high level, and if you take a look at what these phases look like, they're like, you need to build your scene, you need to embed some hotspots. They're closer to the front end user facing narrative just because of the scenario that we built here. I can have a much more nuanced, productive conversation when I say, great, that's phenomenal. This is what an entry-level prototype could look like of one of your modules for the fall semester. So we're not building those large expectations before it ever hits the developer. Yep. What would happen after this is the dev team would get this. We have a shared vocabulary between the programmers, and with the faculty. So at least we're talking about the same things. And then they set the actual timeline. They get to use the creative human things to make this reality. We just have hopefully saved ourselves 3 or 4 conversations where I don't know what that word means. Let's have that back and forth.
So Rebecca, I'll tell you, you've saved yourself even more than the 3 or 4 conversations. And Dr. Clayton, I just want to bring up something that we discovered. We discovered 4 years ago that it takes people 3 to 4 months. I'm talking professional instructional designers or instructors, for us to ask them to build a script for us. It was taking 3 to 4 months. And not because it actually takes them 3 to 4 months, but because they were intimidating themselves before they turned it in, was the reality. So then we brought in AI, we asked them a couple of questions, and in a half an hour, we had a first draft for a script. And it wasn't really them on the spot, so their ability to rewrite it was so much easier and so much faster than having them generate it on their own. So the shrinking of the time from people's fear and just procrastination is tremendous here. Wendy, you had your hand raised.
Yeah, the only thing I was going to add, this is a great conversation, is as you might imagine, we do have developers on site, but our resources are very limited. So this doesn't scale very well. I mean, it does help us be more efficient, but there's only so much development time and capacity that we have. So I just wanted to add that we're also hoping to work with Caius Ruscella to test this with some of our faculty, and in the back of his mind, give us some feedback on how we can also use this with Next Wave Network. So we would love for the output at some stage to be a PDF that we can then share with the network to put out for additional development to be done outside of UCF.
Well, Wendy, part of our excitement has just been how give it away UCF has been with us, right? Like, you know, we've both been in the place of knowledge is there to share. So I greatly appreciate the vision for that. And I know that Next Wave Network, while teaching XR, will be teaching AI. They cannot be separated, right? And maybe there is a back end to this that can even speed up once we start getting templated, repeatable, reliable training that we get to scale. Tim?
First off, kudos, because since the taxonomy's been out, we've been imagining different ways of, you know, being able to make it accessible and usable. And I think this is a fantastic approach. One specific thing I wanted to ask about, I was really impressed that you identified your audience age group and essentially where they sit. And I just have a simple question of whether or not that has an impact on the technology that is recommended, independent of what you say you have available to you, i.e., when it gets to college and adults, is it getting more VR related? And as you go down to high school, elementary, younger, it encourages other forms of technology just based on age groups. I'm just curious if that was integrated.
At this point in time, no. Really, and Andrew gets the credit again for adding this sort of constraints field piece, but we hadn't gotten to the point. Again, looking at a UCF context, we're looking at 18 to whatever age. So we weren't necessarily looking at age brackets lower than us.
Right on.
Yeah, I just love when you saw that age group. I just thought it was really conscientious to actually say, well, where are they in their life right now and what are they doing? And I think it's a great field. And yeah, expanding on that makes this tool even more accessible beyond. So thank you.
It's great feedback, and would love if folks have thoughts on what is the appropriate buckets of technology for those age brackets. Happy to try to include that in here. And for Aaron's sake, I've been going through another process of showing how to, if you have an idea, instead of scanning a syllabus, how to walk through the steps just so he can see soup to nuts versus just the last 2 pages.
Awesome.
And in this particular case, there was no limitations put on the technology. And so I would expect that when we look at the tech branch or the tech stack, it may be a little bit more.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, it's pretty prescriptive. Talking about JSON-driven branch dialoguing tree, and that word prescriptive, I borrow that one actually from my colleague Tim. Tim was the one who introduced that into my vocabulary, and it is just you know, we're thrust into this collaboration with all these very creative minds, and I think everybody just wants to be able to participate in the ideation phase, and so that's where you kind of run aground. But look, everything that Rebecca said in response to that, I think was right on, right? Like what this is doing, which is so amazing, is it's creating common language, and it's a roadmap, you know, like that's to everything that JJ said about the ideation period becoming, you know, like you just get lost in that swamp. Like the faster you can get all the brains seeing and understanding the problem the same way, the faster you can get to something that people can actually experience. And that's where you learn, right? Once it's real and people are doing it, then you get that feedback and you can reiterate and you can iterate on it. So like that's, I love the direction this is all headed in, and the progress you guys are making is really cool.
I'm excited that Dr. Obeid is here to see what they're doing with our taxonomy, brother. Andy, you have your hand raised. Why don't I go ahead and hand it to you, brother, for for your experience with this. And then Kevin, we're going to keep you here with us so that people have more questions at the end. We can answer them. Rebecca, so nice to meet you. Thank you for being a part of this. Before we let Andy go, I just want you to know what you did, I believe is important, right? I believe it's significant. I believe it's going to be essential to bringing immersive learning into scale. So awesome. When I saw it, I was floored, man, by the output. Floored. So Andy?
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, this has been great. And we actually, we did a workshop 2 weeks ago for faculty and staff at Air University. And we actually had a bunch of faculty and staff from Alabama State University that joined us as well. And it was a 2-day workshop on immersive experience design, right? How to make things more immersive using IXD and LXD type approaches. We used the taxonomy and stuff. And then we gave them kind of the wizard to kind of walk through that. And they had similar, I think, feedback. I think the one feedback which it's been added is kind of that comment part at the end, because I think initially when it walks through, for example, our Alabama State University faculty and staff, when they were working through it, it would kind of provide the suggestions, if you will. They all for some reason, even if they sit on the low end, they all seemed that they were outside of the scope of where ASU, Alabama State University people could go. Like, oh my gosh, seems like a lot of tech, right, kind of things, and I just want to kind of make it a little bit more immersive. And that might be partly on our approach of how we kind of look at the taxonomy a little bit, is that it doesn't always have to bring the tech side into it, even though the scales are there to like, okay, low end kind of thing to fully kind of immersive. I still think the AI is probably capturing the technology more than maybe the holistic elements, the scoring, or just in general the overall framework of the taxonomy. So from my perspective, I love this thing. If I was able to code one extra thing potentially into it, or how to look at it is, and I'll give an example. And I think Dr. Obeid actually gave me this example way back when we first started doing this as an example I still use today. And actually we use it as a hands-on activity in our workshop 2 weeks ago. That I gave the task to all the students that were in the workshop. We're going to be at a tournament watching a chess tournament, and you're in the gymnasium. So think of a gymnasium on the basketball court, and there's two chess people at a chess table in the center court of the basketball court, and there's people all around the bleachers watching. The question is, how do you make that more immersive, right? One, for the two chess players, but also for the participants. And so we've walked them, by this point, we've walked them through the taxonomy. We've walked them through what immersive learning means, what immersion means, what presence means. And then they have to come up with, and I break them into groups, and they have to do that using the taxonomy chart. And usually what I have them do first is like, you can't use the technology column yet. So you have to look at all the other elements and stuff like that. This helps them to broaden the scope of what immersion and presence means, and like how to make something more immersive, and by trying to use something simple that they can see, because then we start scaling it. Then we bring in our syllabus, we bring in our lesson plan. But if I start with this, and it was really neat to see what the students come up with, creating storylines, allowing the audience to have choice in what the moves would be for the players, awards, gamification aspects of it, all these things that weren't even technology related, to make this experience for the players and for the audience members more immersive. And so then we take that concept and, okay, how do we do this in instructional design? We look at your lesson and how do we make it more immersive? Looking through the taxonomy chart and looking at elements of immersion, presence, agency, challenge, things like this, the elements that we look at. And so in the wizard, I think it jumps more on the technology as more than it does some of the other things. So I was curious, Kevin, if we could try it real quick, if we could put into the wizard, because it just hit me in the head, put in there a chess tournament, right, or something, and just to see what it would do. It would be interesting to try out. And maybe as we're pulling that up, I can kind of give you another interesting bit of this. A couple weeks ago, I also did a training event for all of Air Education and Training Command on the immersive taxonomy. So the Air Force mandated by Congress and actually mandated by DOJ was to redo Air Education Training Command's acquisitions of XR technology in education and training. And so the commanders of Air Education and Training have come up with a new XR strategy that's going to be implemented across the Air Force for all of our instructional designers, all the bases that do education and training. And they were all, I'll say, trained. They got a 2-hour workshop from me on the immersive experience taxonomy chart. And we showed them the wizard, which they were really, really interested in. And then we had a meeting yesterday. Now there's a committee within that group that is working on what the curriculum development will be to re-certify, develop instructional designers across the Air Force on how to create immersive learning using immersive technology or immersive learning. And I can show you some of those slides, but they overlaid the immersive experience taxonomy on top of some other things. So it's actually being part of the curriculum design that will be part of the AETC XR strategy going forward. So pretty neat and exciting that happened. I didn't even know they were going to do that. I did my part, and then the next meeting this week, they put that into another presentation that was presented to all. There was probably 60 plus instructional designers and technology experts that were in AETC that were briefed on this and showed this kind of overlay of slides where they overlaid the taxonomy chart with a couple other charts. The ARCS model, which is attention, relevance, competence, and satification. There's an article, some authors out there on the ARCS model, and they overlaid the ARCS model strategy with the immersive taxonomy design chart elements, and then as well as the CAMEL model, and kind of overlaid those together as a chart that we'll be using as a guide going to immersive learning. Because for the Air Force, it kind of gets to, it's going to be the instructional designers that are going to come up with the ideas to how to make their training programs more immersive. And then they're going to go out to industry and look for industry that's going to help build these things, right? So as I'm hearing Aaron's conversations about that collaboration of on the front end, at least in the AETC, we don't have technologists in the Air Force. We have instructional designers, and all our technology comes from contractors in industry. We figure out like we need to do this thing immersive. We go out there and find industries like that can create and build it for us. So most of it sits on the instructional side for us, but it was really great to see that we're moving forward. The taxonomy chart, I think I've given it to the program managers of AETC to look at this. We did demo it last week when I showed it to them, when I taught them about the taxonomy. We're not executing it across all the instructional designers, because I know we're still modifying it here as a group and stuff like that, but they really liked it. I think it's I think for AETC it might be good because 99% of AETC sits in technology training, so technical training, which is going to require more technical aspects of immersive learning. But you also have education that falls beneath the Air Education and Training Command, which is where I sit at the university level, where everybody also goes through the Air Force through university schools. And that's more of the education side, which probably it's not going to have the resources, just like Wendy mentioned at UCF. The resources of the technology side is not as easy to access. And so this is what I always get frustrated with AETC and my boss's boss, because 99% of the budget in Air Education Training Command for the Air Force is technical training, how to fly a plane, shoot a gun for every career field in the Air Force. And then once you do that, the rest of your career in the Air Force for the next 20 years is with me in education, right? And so, but there's not funding really for education, because education, they think traditional classroom instruction, much like higher education. So how do you make it more immersive? It's hard to do that. So maybe there are other ways other than just the technology side. So if the wizard can do some of that and bring that in and give more recommendations, much like if you take the chess thing, like what would you do if you look at the taxonomy chart, right? And you had to make something immersive, and you take away like a lesson, but just give an experience. Make that more immersive without the technology column first and see what happens. If the wizard had more of a little bit of that, which I think is what that comment, that last part where you can add in like your limitations. I'm just curious if it's more in the inside of it as well. I'll pause there.
Well, so I've tried to capture what you said as a scenario, and I paused here because I really wanted your take on some of the tweaks here.
Yes. So yeah, sensory. I think that, I mean, so this is the level, because if it was screen. So this is where, because this sensory information is a technology scale. wondering if there's a way to like NA it, maybe,
Just remove it.
or remove it, or have it in, because it just might just the way I process the taxonomy I mean, Dr. Bay and JJ have built the taxonomy, and my brain has been thinking about it for 6 years. It's the foundation of our courses here at university now. It's part of ATC's XR strategy. But my goal has been because I know there's going to be limitations, both even in technical training and in education at the Air Force level, of acquiring funding, resourcing, contracting of companies to build these things out, at least on the Air Force side. And even at the university level, I know that can be a challenge sometimes. So is there ways to start initially making something immersive, almost like a two-parter, and then there's a longer tail for maybe a more immersive project to the same kind of lesson? But like for ASU, when Alabama State University did it, like this is really great, but like we couldn't do any of this stuff. There's just no way. Like we have no technology at all. Like they're just starting from scratch, and there's things like I'm doing are really small things compared to what like Dr. Obeid and others do at their universities and what you guys do. And ASU is like, you're so far ahead of us. And I'm like, really? Because I'm barely doing anything with immersive tech, right? 360 videos or something, or just a little bit of virtual reality in some of the classrooms. We have like one school that's using it for one thing. And I'm struggling to just get people to understand the easiest access point is 360 videos, and I can't get people to get on that train, right? It's just because it's the scary part and stuff, and just resourcing. So is there I think there's two parts to immersion. There's immersion, and then there's immersion with technology. So maybe that's my point, trying to see. And so maybe if it's an NA, potentially, if on this part, if we just scrolled it, I guess it would be to the left, because it would be the lowest sensory part, I think.
Yeah, Rebecca has
I
her
can
hand-
ask a quick question just for my faculty consultation hat on.
Yeah.
How are students going to be engaging with this lesson? Is it going to be in person? Is it going to be on their laptop via the LMS?
So the majority of everything that you'll see in AETC is going to be in-person stuff. We do have a college, but yeah.
Do they generally bring a laptop with them? Do they have a cell phone? What kind of tech do they have available in the room?
Laptop, cell phone, tablets. Yeah, we're bring your own device for Air University, and then in the technical schools will have laptops that the students will have because they're in tech training, which means they just came into the Air Force, so they're not expected to have resources to these things.
I only ask because we can absolutely take this feedback and add some more nuance to this poll, but the way I've been imagining it is just, do you have access to a mobile screen? This will give you that access.
Okay, perfect.
And Rebecca, one of the things that's being completely skipped over is the power of micro learning on somebody's phone.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh my gosh, you want to hear a story real fast?
Yes, please.
So avatar conversation simulations, right? Orchestrate VR. I think most of us have maybe seen the Orchestrate VR platform where you can talk to avatars on a mobile device or on the web-based thing, and it's AI driven. We've been using avatar sims for a long time at Air University, and before even AI was out, we're still using them. Where's a sim specialist that controls that avatar, right? So you're on a screen just like this, Zoom or Google, an avatar comes on screen. I'm talking to the avatar based on a leadership problem that the Air Force has, and you have to solve it or deal with that person in front of you. And so it's a human controlling that avatar, and that's been going on for 6 or 7 years. AI is caught up now, and we do that. But one of our main courses in the Air Force, the #1 course in the Air Force on leadership, uses the actor-controlled avatar sims on day 2 of the course and on day 8 of the course. What we're actually doing now is everything in between. The students are actually given a cell phone, we call it a commander cell phone, from a company, and it has text and video calls and FaceTime calls. They're all AI-driven avatars. So the scenario that you start on day 2 with, talking to that subordinate of yours, that conversation continues for the next 4 or 5 days, and then it ends with a capstone with the avatar simulation. The point of that is what JJ is mentioning here. The conversation, the simulation, the storyline continues throughout the whole thing, and all we had to do was bring in a phone because they continue the conversations. They still talk to the avatar, but now it's an AI driven because it's asynchronous now. Because the students just take that phone with them back to their dorm rooms. Whenever they do it, the text pops up and they got to reply to it, and it says, "Hey, you have a video call with the first sergeant in the Air Force. They want to talk to you," and it tracks those things. So we've been testing it last week, and we're bringing it in some more to testing, but just shows you like the tablets and things like that, or iPhones and stuff like that, or just phones in general as a mobile device. But a storyline, the story is really the more important part. The story is what made this all more immersive, right? And so that's kind of the thought process is I can bring in tech to do an avatar sim I can make it AI, but if I just do it episodically on like day 1 or day 2, or just do it one time as a capstone, and because we talked about leadership for 8 days, and now I'm going to put you in a capstone, that's great. That's what we've been doing for 6 or 7 years. We're like, how do we make it more immersive without having to really bring in more cost or even more tech? And it's just literally, it's a phone that we give them, they check out, that has an app on it that is AI driven. Aaron, I know you jumped up on screen there too. So that's a different platform than Orchestrate, but we're also going to be using Orchestrate as well. Yeah.
It is, and somebody might have put a bug in my ear about this too. So we're exploring whether or not we can give you a similar user experience Orchestrate too.
Yep. But it's all about the story, right? The story, and that's if you look in the taxonomy chart, that's one of the elements that's in there. Is it a pre-created? Is it student driven? Right? Is there choices given and stuff like that? And the fact that it's continuous throughout the entire course versus being episodically. So those are things, as I think of the wizard, can the wizard provide potential recommendations of things like that as well as technology?
So I want to hand this back over to Kevin.
Yes, please.
I feel like Kevin has something, but what I want to say is that let's remember that our elementary school teachers are expert immersive teachers, right? And they're using story, right? And so if professors get a story play they can do live with their students, right? All they need to do is stick in a 360 camera for that to live in perpetuity. And remember, mistakes are useful when you capture them, right? Because the person has now a point of decision where they've got to agree or disagree with what was going on. Either way, I want to concur with you, Andy, that I think, and I think immersion starts with story, right? Versus starting with technology. Anyway, Kevin, as you can see, you've got us all talking about what you've created, brother.
Yes, I love it.
What did you want to share, man?
Well, so it's interesting, and I don't disagree, Andy, whatsoever. We had 2 parallel projects, and I think I shared these at one point in time. We have this other one that is around a narrative storytelling and how to transform an existing online course that is sort of boring and you have to drudge through week to week. And if you could create it into a narrative storytelling, you could do stealth assessment, and the students through gameplay were being assessed on how well they were progressing through the environment. So again, using my media literacy course that I had taught in the past, it's actually taking a full course cartridge export from the LMS, ingesting it in there, going through, reading through the XML, getting a sense of what are all the assessments, the activities, what is all the content, and then it's going to suggest a minimum of 4 scenarios that it can refine this. So if I want to turn this into an espionage thriller, like a James Bond type piece, but still hitting all of the learning objectives around media literacy and everything that's associated with it, I could go that way. And what it'll start doing is building out sort of a high level, what is the major story, and then looking at each one of the modules and saying, okay, in this module, you're talking about deepfakes. The mission and the language will change. Instead of saying your assignment is, the mission is, and instead of being a student or a learner, you're going to be an agent, and you're going to be elevated based on levels of competency and skills acquisition based on that. So I definitely see this as an immersive tool, different than sort of the tech stack where the other tool is leaning more towards. But there could be a way at some point in time of merging these two or having them have at least a bridge together. But, I didn't want to take away from this, but this is another tool that we can share perhaps and get your feedback on how this might be used in a real live classroom versus an asynchronous classroom.
Kevin, let me reframe this so that everybody understands the absolute powerful thing that you have built and what you are talking about. And Dr. Clayton and I had a long talk because the Air Force is trying to do similar stuff.
Yes.
So I'll give him the opportunity to speak in a second. But to clarify for everyone, what Kevin is doing is creating a secondary story that wraps over your entire semester. So you have you're a spy, you're a pilot in Space Command right? And you've got to figure out these things, and it contextualizes the knowledge. So instead of it being a retention-based learning experience, now you're synthesizing the story or the knowledge into a resulted story, right? That makes it active. It is everything that I've dreamt of in the future, Kevin. I think it is so filled with play. And when you can get students playing, man, the retention is off the charts, right? Part of it is that they simply care, right? When you look at them, they simply care about their learning, and then they argue with each other, and now they're invested and they're speaking. So Andy, let me hand you to that, but I wanted everyone to hear what you were talking about. You were talking about an AI that drives a secondary story, that takes the learning in it and integrates it into synthesized relationship discovery, right?
Yeah.
And
this is where, and this is where we struggle, right? So the Air Force, it's at Air University, or just in general in AETC, we have instructional designers, ISDs. They've been trained in instructional design, the ADDIE process, right? Develop content, create the assessment, right? And it all lines up, right? But they're not trained, they're not educated, and they don't have the skills to make it immersive, right? Which is where, and this is what AETC is having the problem with, because we've gone from rote memorization and content learning to now competency-based learning, which is application, which is really where you start. If you bring in a storyline, right, you can see them synthesizing and applying what they need to do to the storyline, right? So this is huge. I think this was actually this is probably even more beneficial for me at Air University. The Wizard is probably more beneficial to the Air Force at large for AETC because of the technical part, because the technical training, they're going to look at, when they talk about immersiveness, they're talking about how do I train them in the skill much faster, be more proficient, speed to proficiency, which is going to mean you're going to need immersive tech. I can't put everybody in an airplane and fly and train them how to fly an airplane when I only have 2 airplanes, right? Because that costs a lot of money and fuel and everything. But I can put everybody in a simulator, and I can have a room full of like 10 simulators, and I can put right type of thing. That's why I think the Wizard fits extremely well for our training part of AETC, which is 99% of what the Air Force does. Education side, this is probably where it sits more. This probably sits even better because our professors, instructors, right? I mean, more than half of our instructors are military people. They're instructors because they were really specifically experts in their career field, and then their next assignment was go to Air University. Now you're going to be a teacher and instructor because you're an expert. But they're not instructors. They're experts in their career field that have to come and teach. And then those that teach at Air University are all professors. And sometimes we can understand professors. They're very academically knowledgeable, but they don't always have the immersive learning understanding either. And the majority of ours don't sit there either because they're poli-sci historians. They grew up in a world where they were taught academically differently than our students that are coming in today that need to learn differently, right? So instead of reading a whole book in one day and then coming to lecture with 500 other students in the auditorium and listening to the professor speak on stage and then go to a small classroom to have a discussion about what he said on stage, that's what we do at Air University. And I'm trying to get everybody to get away from that into immersive learning, but they don't have that skill set. They don't know how to do it because they need this type of thing to get their brain kind of thinking. And I have another thing I would love to show you, but I'll pause there and let others jump in.
Here, let me stop sharing so I can see everybody.
So Andy, go ahead and jump in. There's no.
Yeah, I think so. Back in 2024, when my students presented at ITSEC on JJ's taxonomy, and it was called a suite of devices. And it kind of goes to the Wizard taxonomy, because at the beginning of the Wizard taxonomy, one of the first things I think it does once you get into the questions is it asks you what your what your outcome is and your objective, right? So now it's getting into the ISD part a little bit, right? The analysis assessment part, and that can be a struggle too. And that kind of not tripped up, but when we got to that part with the group in my workshop, because everybody wanted to well, what's the assessment we're gonna do? They got stuck for a second. That's where they focused their most time, was what's the assessment? We have to type it in and it has to be perfect. What are we trying to assess? So they thought it had to be perfect because of the assessment type stuff. What my student did was took flow theory, which looks at challenge and task, right? You have to write, if you're making something immersive, it needs to be at the right level with the skill set that the person comes to, with the right immersive technology, at the right skill to be able to do that, keep them flow. For example, if you try and put somebody in fighter aircraft that's never flown an aircraft before, they're going to have anxiety, right? Because the degree of immersion is very high, right? But their skill level is very low. So it's,
Cognitive overload, right?
yeah, overload. Same thing on the other way. If you put a fighter pilot into a Cessna and try and teach them how to fly, they're going to be bored because they already know how to fly a fighter jet, right? So that's boredom. So everything else in the middle is flow. But what my student did was change those two axes. The horizontal axis is the learning outcome, factual, conceptual, procedural, and transfer. And then the vertical is the degree of immersion. How much level of immersion do you need, which starts to come from JJ's taxonomy, this taxonomy, 0 to 4, right? And so if you need something procedural, you kind of look at where that fits in flow, and that's somewhere between 1 and 3, a level of immersion of 1 to 3. So then you go to the taxonomy chart and you score and highlight the things that that you basically want, right, from the taxonomy chart, if you will. And so when you do that, then you kind of add up your score, if you will, right, the chart itself, and you add that up, and then you divide that by the number of things that you like highlighted or circle from the chart. And so we did that. We did this for helicopter pilot training next. How to do startup procedures in a VR simulator for helicopter pilot training. So before they even learn how to fly, they go in the simulator and just learn how to start the helicopter in VR. And then my student went through the taxonomy chart and highlighted things that's physicalized. It's a movement thing, it's single player, it's a setting, it's free will, it's reinforcement, it's in VR, there's no meta control, it's synthesis for didactic capacity, the data is in game. So you add that up, it's like a 21, you divide that by 10, because that was 10 elements, you get an average degree of immersion of 2.1. And so then once I have that, then I can start looking at where does it sit with the learning outcome. And I can show you guys the picture, the paper and the presentation on this, but really it's not about one lesson, it really is about the entire lesson plan. That's just one task in the whole entire course of how to train somebody to fly a helicopter in a VR simulator. But what they found out is that there are several other tasks in VR and the helicopter thing that also sit at the average degree of 2.1. And they all still have the same learning outcome, right? Some might be procedural, some might be conceptual. So if you start to overlay your learning outcomes, conceptual, procedural, are next to each other, but they kind of can overlay each other, right? And so when you start to do this math, which was what she's done in the paper in her presentation, you find out that, for example, in ours, we have probably 22 tasks in the syllabus, and 13 of those subtasks, have an average degree of immersion of 0.3 to 0.7, right? So then that means I don't need a Quest 3 headset. I don't need a Reverb headset. I don't need a high-end headset. I might just need a desktop trainer, right, to do those tasks. And then there's 8 stages that have an average degree of immersion of 1.3 to 1.8. And so that's going to be a different device probably, or requirements. The reason we do that or built that is because when we say we want a VR simulator to train helicopter pilots, what happens and what's happened in the past is the Air Force or whoever goes out and buys, and some company says, we have the best VR simulator for you, and it costs X, Y, and Z, and we want you to use this headset. And then they get it, and it's like too much stuff because like 80% of the tasks for what they need to do in the syllabus doesn't require that. But that's what they went and bought because they knew it needed it for the other higher end, higher degree of immersion levels, right, kind of thing. And that's why the whole title of the paper is a suite of devices. I only say this because if there's ways where you could take her math kind of formula, her steps, and put it into the wizard with this, because it's the taxonomy that's driving this whole thing, to do your scoring, to get your average degree of immersion, and you line it up with your level of learning outcome. It's going to tell you what you need, and then you use the words from the taxonomy to become your requirements. And I'll just give an example for our desktop trainer.
Andrew?
Yeah. Yes.
I'm sorry. We're in our
I know.
3
Sorry.
minutes further.
Yeah.
So this is so exciting, in the rarity of getting you all together. I want everyone to know that our discovery that's really important to share, that we'll share more with you on public safety next time. The big discovery that we found is that people need proofs of concept and case studies for immersive learning experiences. So we just talked to CDW about it today. We're now going out to help people build their immersive learning experiences for their leadership to be able to see and what they can replicate on their own. So that was something we wanted to share. And if you know of any organizations that need a case study, need a proof of concept, or are trying to build an immersive experience on their own and need help, please point them our way. We're in the midst of that for the next 6 to 9 months, probably, as we also are building out labs. Next month, we'll share with you what's going on with public safety. But today, Kevin, thank you so much, sir. What you've contributed to us on our Yellow Brick Road, man, is just amazing. It's so important. So I just want to hand it back to you, brother, for a second.
No, I mean, honestly, when we showed this last time, Andrew, I'm blanking on your colleague's name. Was it Chris?
Yes.
You both provided great feedback that we immediately turned around and implemented into the tool. Would love feedback on Questify. Again, these are prototypes. They can morph into what they need to be. So without folks actually using it in broader scope and who have far more years of experience in immersive than I do, they will be what they'll be, but I know that we can make them better.
Kevin, thank you. I will send you guys an email, Kevin, Wendy, of one Questify, if we can look at that a little bit. And then I'll send you this paper and presentation to let you kind of read through and see what I was kind of talking through, and just so you can visually see it, because it might be another level to the wizard if you're able to kind of really score to show you what requirements. It's another part of the requirements, and so communication requirements is important.
And
there's a link to the Questify prototype in the chat that put up there. So if anybody on the call, take a look at it. Sorry if you're watching this video, just reach out, obviously, to Kevin or us, and we'll share the link. Also, the information you just provided, Dr. Clayton, if you could share that with the group, that is fantastic. That's a lot of math there that I didn't have to do, and now I can take a look at it and get the benefits. So I really appreciate that. Yeah, and we are at time, so anybody who has any other commitments, just want to make you aware of that. If you don't, we've got an extra 5 minutes for everybody wants to chat. I anticipate that if people take a look at Questify and poke around at it, collect your feedback, gather and share. That's the entire point of this committee and the ultimate community. How do we take some things, throw it in front of our peers, and get feedback that make it something that we didn't even know it could be, or help us get over little blocks and barriers? So this was an awesome meeting. I really appreciate you guys sharing these things and your ability to listen and take in all the stuff that's coming and look at it as the prototype it is to bang it into what it needs to become. I wouldn't mind continuing this dialogue next week, but let's see if we can collect some information and see what we can't do about it.
Awesome.